Scientists of Reddit. What's a discovery that should have blown people's minds? Story 1. In the past 5 years, we have essentially cured the majority of cystic fibrosis patients. Like the triple cocktail for HIV patients in the 90s or insulin treatment for diabetics, it is the most astounding medical discovery that I can think of. Thousands of people with cystic fibrosis had their expected lifespans normalized in just 5 years. Although the treatments are remarkable, they do not work on all CF mutations. I cried reading a piece published in The Atlantic last year. Story 2. Here we have central pattern generators, a student, not a scientist. It was recently discovered by neuroscientists that our spine is capable of producing rhythmic movement patterns, like walking independently of the brain. Investigations into this as a potential therapy for SCI are ongoing. During the previous semester's neuroscience class, a local researcher who runs a lab specifically on this topic gave a guest presentation. People paralyzed by spinal cord injuries will be able to walk again with an electric implant, in his opinion, within the next 20 years. Even though this crosses my mind at least once a week, nobody outside of the neuroscience community has ever brought it up. Story 3. Stem cells with induced pluripotent potential. Cells isolated from embryos have long been the backbone of stem cell research. That generates a great deal of moral controversy. Moreover, I think it might lead to problems with the body rejecting cells from a donor other than the transplant recipient. Researchers later found that by exposing normal skin cells to specific transcription factors, they could transform the cells into stem cells. It is from this point that the cells can undergo differentiation into other cell types such as neurons, heart cells, etc. Transplanting skin cells from a patient with Parkinson's disease who has lost 95% of the cells in a neuronal pathway responsible for motor activity and other functions could help restore some of the lost function in that area of the brain. When I first heard about it, I was astounded. The subject is quite intriguing. In my opinion, they have barely begun to tap into its full potential. That is, until you mix it with CRISPR to alter genes, which could lead to the cure or treatment of countless ailments. Story 4. The CRISPR-Cas9 system is completely out of this world. This biological technology has allowed for genetic editing, which has restored sight to people who were born blind. Editing the DNA of mosquitoes and passing them on to their progeny makes them infertile, effectively eliminating malaria. Improving the nutritional value of food is possible and has been done. For example, in developing nations, golden rice has increased vitamin A production. People simply shrugged as they beheld Gattaca in all his flesh. Edit. Many people are wondering why this hasn't happened yet or why I still have mosquitoes, and I can tell you that the technology is still in its early stages. It's still not right, but it's a huge step forward in humankind's capacity to influence the natural world. Finding the correct gene targets takes a long time and a lot of trial and error, and that's just for our own species. It becomes significantly more challenging when trying to target numerous genes simultaneously. Keep in mind that genes are really just random DNA sequences found somewhere along the entire chain. Not to mention that sequences on the chain hardly never appear side by side. Not only that, but some of you have brought out the fact that we have no idea how this might affect the target species and all the other species that interact with it. Put simply, there are a lot of problems and repercussions that need to be thought out before fully deploying anything so technologically advanced. Story 5. The excitement surrounding the James Webb Telescope seemed to fade away abruptly, in my opinion. Keeping up with the complex and challenging process of designing, launching, and deploying that solar orbiting marvel was really exciting for me. There was a negligible possibility that we could rectify any problems that may arise. Since the Hubble was in a low Earth orbit, astronauts could access it and repair it. Oh, and let's not forget Hubble either. And the missions of the Space Shuttle. You're absolutely right. The build-up to the James Webb Space Telescope, JWST, was electric. Years of delays, mind-bending engineering, and a one-shot deployment plan 1.5 million kilometers from Earth made it one of the riskiest, most ambitious missions in space history. And then, it launched perfectly. It unfolded like origami in space. It worked. And once the buzz wore off, the public kind of moved on. But here's the thing, JWST is quietly rewriting what we know about the universe. It's peering into galaxies that formed just a few 100 million years after the Big Bang. It's detecting the atmospheres of exoplanets, hinting at where life might someday be found. It's doing exactly what it was built for, blowing the minds of astronomers every day. Story 6. For decades, as the West concentrated on creating antibiotics, countries in the Eastern Bloc, and Georgia in particular, employed bacteriophages to combat bacterial illnesses. If you have made it through all the previous treatments and are still not well, bacteriophage treatment is available in the United States. It would appear that the pharmaceutical corporations are having trouble finding a way to profit from the treatment, which is why it is being pushed to the absolute frontier of medicine. Recent development. I have personally selected and employed bacteriophages. Their use is commonplace in genetic research. No, that's not it. In the past, this method relied on locating a naturally occurring mutated phage that could target the particular bacteria. The presence of Shiga toxin or related genes in the phage has been the main worry in the US. In my experience, this latter is flawed in two ways, which makes me question the assumption. Decades of studies before this one didn't find this to be a problem, but I haven't found anything definitive either. In any case, with modern technology, the test is almost insignificant. Just for fun, where do you often hunt for a good phage? Story 7. The identification of the memory engram and the potential for its artificial manipulation in brain memory. Someone at Boston University was able to do more than just pinpoint which neural networks are responsible for certain memories. He could also erase or add new memories by manipulating existing ones. This is the most out there science fiction concept I've ever heard of. Dr. Steve Ramirez is an incredibly approachable and brilliant teacher. His TED Talk is available on YouTube. Story 8. There is a strong possibility that AlphaFold 2 will be the most revolutionary tool in the annals of biological science. Any biolab in the world can access it because it's open source and free to download. It's also very adaptable to individual scenarios, even more so than a typical CCNN. Even though it's still young, the study being conducted with AlphaFold's assistance will impact the entire human experience for decades. However, many individuals are passionately arguing about AI in general, from both sides, and the negative rhetoric is overpowering any positive progress in the field. How strange that nobody appears to care that we might have invented something as revolutionary as the clay-fired brick, which had a profound impact on human civilization, and nobody seems to be paying any attention. AlphaFold 2 is quietly one of the most transformative breakthroughs in modern biology, and yet it's flying under the public radar. The fact that it can predict protein structures with astonishing accuracy for millions of proteins, and it's open source, that's unheard of. It's like handing every scientist on Earth a blueprint generator for life's molecular machinery. What makes it even more powerful is how it's accelerating real-world breakthroughs, from drug discovery to enzyme engineering to understanding rare diseases. Tasks that used to take years of lab work and millions in funding can now be tackled in days. And the ripple effect, it could extend across healthcare, agriculture, climate science, and beyond. Story 9, GLP-1S. It is truly groundbreaking. It helps those with diabetes balance their blood sugar levels and encourages those who are overweight to lose weight even when other therapies have failed. It helps with a variety of addictions, including shopping, smoking, and drinking. In patients with renal failure, it has been demonstrated to have a preventive effect on cardiovascular health. It's used to treat specific liver conditions, and that is the extent of our confirmations thus far. When I think of antibiotics, GLP-1S are on par with penicillin and pasteurization. Story 10. Though I lack scientific training as an engineer with a passion for the field, I believe that the rapid development of mRNA vaccines and the technology behind them, akin to a Swiss Army knife, are greatly underestimated by the general public. Those who fail to understand the intricacies of the technology often fail to adequately appreciate technological advances such as the HPV vaccination, discussed elsewhere in this thread, and similar very complex developments. That's great. With over 20 years of expertise in the field, I have been a leader in infectious illness diagnostics. It is unbelievable how quickly the mRNA vaccine was developed. It will revolutionize the fight against infectious diseases. I am very grateful for the opportunity to have worked on that team. My heart breaks for the people who believe that autism is caused by bogus vaccines, COVID-19. The anger takes over so quickly that I can't even talk about it. Aristocratic scumbags. Story 11. We still have a long way to go, but amyloid proteins provide a possible explanation for how our metabolism and the environment affect the expression of specific genes in our DNA. This is noteworthy because it provides some vindication to the long debunked theories of genetics put out by researchers like Ivan Michurin, Lamarck, and Lysenko, who argued that environmental variables, not DNA, were the main determinants of heredity. The issue arose when our understanding of DNA led us to overcorrect a little and disregard environmental and metabolic influences in favor of thinking exclusively about DNA, which has always left some things unexplained. For example, newer research has demonstrated that DNA methylation and amyloid proteins, which can influence the expression of specific genes inside your DNA, can explain the heredity of alcoholism, which was previously poorly described by DNA. The reality, as it turned out, is and always has been a combination of the two. While the Lamarckist and Michurinist camp was completely mistaken to deny DNA's supremacy, the mainstream scientific community was equally wrong to ignore the competing view for so long. Story 12, published in 2012 by Darren Akemoglu and James A. Robinson, Why Nations Fail: The Origins of Power, Prosperity, and Poverty, is an economics book. A country's prosperity is directly correlated to the quality of its institutions, as these two men demonstrated. That is, they demonstrated that economic prosperity is a direct result of well-established equitable institutions. For example, a nation's future prosperity is best predicted by the quality of its institutions. Despite the success of their book and the fact that their study received the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2024, politics throughout the world have not changed. Economic libertarianism and the preference for a small government have recently made a comeback, despite their research that should have disproved these ideas on their own. Why Nations Fail is one of those rare books that feels like a lens. Once you read it, you start seeing its thesis everywhere. Akemoglu and Robinson didn't just write a book, they dropped a framework that helps decode global inequality. Their argument that inclusive institutions, those that are fair, transparent, and empower broad participation, are the engine behind lasting prosperity is both compelling and deeply researched. Story 13, an important step toward confirming abiogenesis as the starting point for life, was made in late 2024 when a study demonstrated that silicates acted as a catalyst in the creation of amino acids and protocells. To eliminate extraneous interferences, they coated the container with Teflon and placed it in a dark room, essentially redoing the Miller-Urey experiment. The original experiment had shown that simple organic chemicals might develop from inorganic materials in conditions comparable to early Earth. Basically, nothing occurred. In contrast to the initial experiment, no reaction took place and no new chemicals were produced. They opted to rerun the experiment with some silicate pellets added to their glass container since the first one had failed. The outcomes exceeded all expectations. They didn't simply get organic substances, they got completely produced biomolecules. The building blocks of DNA and RNA, the 5 nucleotides, were among these biomolecules. Empty protocells, which are phospholipid chains that are completely closed, were found. Story 14, a drug created to treat feline infectious peritonitis, a very unusual illness in cats. This horrible variant of feline coronavirus is 100% lethal if not treated. But the drug I mentioned earlier was initially synthesized in 2018 by Gilead Sciences, an HIV medication company in Raleigh, North Carolina. This drug effectively doubled the mortality rate almost immediately. I find it interesting that the FDA took so long to license it, considering that it was manufactured here, but other nations had already done so. What's even more bizarre is how it tackles and cures FIP symptoms instantaneously. Neurological FIP manifested in our cat as severe listlessness, severe dehydration, total lack of thirst and hunger, unsteadiness, and fever. At the end of the first week, she had no further symptoms at all. Once the first pill was taken, the temperature subsided. Learn as much as you can about this terrible disease if you own cats. These days, an MRI or spinal tap is required for a diagnosis, and if medication isn't started immediately, the majority of cats that pass from it don't survive. Just so you know, I'm not a scientist by training, but ever since we had to treat our cat for this illness, I've read up on the subject. Story 15, the identity of Jack the Ripper may have been revealed by 140-year-old DNA evidence. Quoting a story from the New York Post from February 15th, according to English historian and author Russell Edwards, the 23-year-old Polish immigrant Aaron Kosminski, who passed away in a mental institution in 1919, was the serial murderer who terrorized Victorian London's East End in the late 1800s. DNA evidence discovered on a shawl recovered from the crime scene confirmed this. In an interview with Today in Australia, Edwards described the moment when the DNA from the victim's blood was matched with a direct female descendant as the most incredible experience of her life. Story 16. This was a huge deal when it happened. The complete elimination of smallpox, the worst illness known to man. Nowadays, it's hidden by anti-vax rhetoric. If it resurfaces, we won't be able to eradicate it. A similar infectious disease in cattle, Rinderpest, was eradicated in 2011. Only these two diseases have ever been completely eliminated from the face of the earth, meaning they pose no longer any danger to human health. Another thing I'd like to bring to your attention is that it costs $5 billion to eradicate one of the worst diseases in cattle on a global scale. After adjusting for inflation, the cost of eradicating smallpox in 1967 was $300 million, or almost $2.8 billion USD. A total of $7.8 billion to wipe out some of the world's deadliest illnesses. Story 17. So here we have bacteria that can talk to each other and even have their own language. Quorum sensing is not applicable when bacteria reach a quorum. That is, enough of them to do something like, okay, now there's enough of us, let's release the toxins and form a biofilm and light up like in bioluminescence. They begin to communicate with one another through chemical signals and vote on decisions. It's similar to microorganisms' social media, sick people's chat rooms, and it has been occurring on Earth long before the arrival of humanity. Did we really just shrug? From reevaluating medications to developing novel bioengineered systems, this has far-reaching consequences for our knowledge of infections. On a molecular level, it's similar to understanding that ants construct cities. This is wildly underappreciated science. The idea that bacteria can talk to each other, not just randomly, but through structured chemical signaling, aka quorum sensing, completely reframes how we think about microscopic life. These aren't just passive germs floating around. They're strategizing, coordinating, and making group decisions. That's mind-blowing. And your comparison to social media for microbes? Perfect. They're literally sending molecular messages that say, wait for it, okay, now unleash the toxins. It's collective intelligence at the microbial level. Story 18, stellar spectroscopy is a tried and true method. The theory of quantum mechanics states that when an atom is near enough to a light source, the electrons in its orbital can sometimes either emit or absorb the light. Having a large number of atoms can result in an overwhelming amount of light on a cosmic scale. However, only photons with a precise energy matching the energy of an element's electron orbital can be absorbed. The wavelength is the determinant of the photon's energy. Additionally, we have a good grasp of the typical wavelengths of the elements. Thus, there are either a great deal of extra photons or a great deal of photons that do not make it to our telescopes despite traveling throughout the entire universe. Due to the interaction of the smallest scale known to man, we know what elements are in stars and the media between them on the greatest size known to man, which is hundreds of light years distant. Story 19, GLP-1s promote satiety and facilitate weight loss. An injection can eliminate the biggest threat to global and American health. Even though most Americans are overweight now, I remember being the overweight child in school and being teased for being too chunky. For the uninitiated, this medicine has the ability to alter the balance of two hormones, one that tells the body to burn fat rather than store it. Huge change for someone like me who has spent their whole life in storage mode. And the other that tells the body it is full. No more hunger pangs. Feeling like normal folks for a change is ludicrous. At this point in my weight loss journey, I'm 50 pounds lighter than I was when I was a senior in high school. There will be tremendous long-term health benefits, and my body feels fantastic now. Story 20, there ought to have been a ruckus in 2016 when the findings of the CTE brain analyses on retired football players were published in JAMA, revealing the full scope and frequency of these injuries. Indeed, it was known about. But it appears that the majority has opted to disregard it, blaming others and using excuses like they knew what they were getting into, Or they get compensated well enough for that risk. Ha ha. Even after retiring, many of these individuals are still receiving money from workers' compensation claims due to the incapacitating consequences of CTE. Retired NFL players have relied on my legal experience to file workers' compensation claims. I've always assumed that the reason there's still too much money for the teams to care is because CTE is far more frequent than anyone knows. You're totally right. In an ironic turn of events, some high schools are having trouble fielding teams due to a lack of players, as more and more parents opt not to allow their children to play football at any age because to the widespread awareness of football-related CTE. Story 21. I'm currently reading a course on ecological restoration, but I've completely lost track of the details and really should get back to it. Reading up on the state of the ecology throughout the world was an overwhelming task for me, and it's regrettable. This is heartbreaking. Politicians and entrepreneurs alike are blissfully ignorant of the present situation. They foolishly believe that carrying on in the same way they have for years will bring about no change, and that once they have amassed wealth, they can relax in their tamed wealth while others endure hardship, just like before. However, that is not accurate. It won't be as quick as Hollywood makes it seem. Rather, our species will go extinct unless the world's most powerful people take action. However, this is merely because our species is simply too tired to cope. Fewer births, lower IQ, more illnesses, shorter lifespans, the natural depletion of our species to the point where it can no longer be sustained. Sadness reigns, and nobody has any idea how we are doing. Well, it's not easy to understand. Those who are capable of taking action choose not to. Story 22. Leukemia in children. Sadly, a pediatric hematologist who was close to my family's extended family eventually became chair of the department at UC. As a child, I remember that she had binders filled with photographs of her leukemia patients, all of whom were children. Our insurance agent, who is around 10 to 15 years our junior, beat the most prevalent kind of pediatric leukemia. Now, 90% of cases are curable thanks to the work of our family friend and other researchers. It is very remarkable. Story 23. This includes Lipitor and other comparable statins. For years, these medications have been subtly rescuing millions of lives, and everyone just takes them for granted like any other kind of treatment. Lipitor is likely to be one of the most significant life-saving pharmaceuticals in history, but we get all worked up about the potential number of lives saved by penicillin or new vaccines, and rightfully so. Also, fertilizers that are based on nitrogen. The contemporary dirts of 7 billion people definitely couldn't exist without it, but we don't discuss it much. Therefore, billions of people might not have been born, and food insecurity would be significantly worse if an inventor from Germany hadn't come up with this. Leukemia, especially in children, is one of the most devastating diagnoses a family can face. But to hear how far we've come, from binders filled with faces and heartbreak to a 90% cure rate for the most common type, is nothing short of astonishing. It's a testament to the decades of tireless work by researchers, doctors, and families who never gave up. Your family friend's dedication, preserving the memory of every child they treated, speaks volumes. It's not just about medicine, it's about compassion, human connection, and the drive to push boundaries for the next kid who walks through the door. Story 24. The field of optogenetics. Channel rhodopsins, CHR, coupled with cell-specific targeting techniques and fluorescent sensors, have revolutionized neuroscience research in the last decade. There are various types of CHRs, which are unique proteins derived from microbes, and their primary purpose is to operate as light-gated switches, activating or inactivating neurons that express them. Using awake, freely moving, behaving animals as subjects, researchers can selectively activate or inactivate a genetically defined, specific population of neurons on various timelines by exposing the neurons to light of specified wavelengths. So, we can establish a causal relationship between brain activity and behavior. Through the use of these remarkable instruments, we have gained a wealth of knowledge regarding intrinsic motivation, addiction, social behavior, motor control, memory, anxiety, learning, etc. Story 25. Insulin resistance can be improved by applying an electrical impulse or a heat shock. Subsequent research demonstrated that it was possible to induce insulin production in animals suffering from type 1 diabetes by means of a tailored electrical impulse. A prototype for an artificial pancreas was subsequently created, which soon may put an end to type 1 and 2 and other types of diabetes. The first study dates back to 2005 or 2006, and subsequent investigations from 2008 to 2010 and beyond have all shown the same thing. I have faith that endocrinology researchers who work with diabetes medication and patients already know this information, as do specialists in this area. However, this isn't making headlines or getting people pumped up, even though it totally ought to. These days, we can administer electric shocks to mice with handheld battery-operated devices, and the results are promising. For quite some time, it has been understood that certain organs or cells can be selectively and safely altered by the use of low electric currents in medical research. Frankenstein reborn? No. Clinical medicine, made to assist actual individuals. Story 26, the ramifications of the mRNA COVID vaccinations, including their success and safety, seem to have gone unnoticed, or perhaps it's just a communal shrug. This is an innovative approach to vaccine design and engineering that enables us to target any protein. Beyond infectious diseases like cancer, there has been discussion of using these vaccinations to treat a wide range of other illnesses. Consequently, we have a new arsenal of weapons to combat a variety of diseases that are currently untreatable, as well as a tool that can efficiently generate an immunity to any antigen that can be identified. On a broader note, though, I'd like to speak about the medical revolution of the past 3 decades. Things that were completely out of this world when I was a kid are becoming the norm, and I'm not quite 40 years old. Implants that can restore hearing to those who are born deaf, spinal bridges that can help the crippled walk, and delicate surgery to restore sight to those who have lost it are just a few of the things happening right now. Until they personally gain from this, it seems like a lot of people don't give a hoot about how incredible they are. Without a doubt, this garbage outshines the space race, but it receives essentially zero cultural clout. Story 27, something you just found? The impact of bioelectric fields on embryogenesis, tissue shape, and organ regeneration was uncovered by Michael Levin, in my opinion. Living nanobots were even created by him using it. This should completely astound anyone with a biological background. I adore how, when he begins to grasp the enormity of this finding, the interviewer is rendered speechless at points. Despite this, hardly anyone has paid any attention to it. Nearly nothing. As a doctor who is very interested in developments in regenerative medicine, since it will be crucial for my subspecialty, so I always pay attention to stuff like this, I believe this research will transform medicine within a couple of decades, and I personally think this guy will win the Nobel Prize for it. Timeliness is an issue for me, and I find it hard to believe that this won't change the face of medicine in the long run. Our previous approaches to repairing organs and tissues are utterly and entirely rewritten by this. We have had to reevaluate several fundamental beliefs about molecular biology due to how surprising and strange it is.